The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 21st chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus looked up and saw rich people putting their gifts into the treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. He said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Well, it's been quite a week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, and Iowa City, Iowa, and Washington, District of Columbia. On Tuesday, after bitterly divisive campaigns which surfaced some divisions in this country and then played on them and seasoned them with bile and rancor and sometimes just juvenile childishness, on Tuesday, when an election season everybody couldn't wait to have come to an end, finally came to an end, we elected as president of this country a man whom apparently half or so of my fellow Americans had attached their deepest dreams and highest hopes, while simultaneously, apparently another half or so of my fellow Americans had attached to the same man their deepest anger and worst fears. The president-elect immediately pledged to be a uniter, not a divider. We will see how that goes. In the meantime, we here at Gloria Dei, some of us who voted one way and some of us who voted another way, including no doubt a few of us who can't imagine civilly talking about that fact, at least not yet, are here to worship the one and same one whom together we call Lord. He is the one in whom, in the words of a song we'll sing in just a few more weeks, though the weather doesn't seem like it's ready yet, the one in whom, says this song, the hopes and fears of all the years are met. It won't, of course, prove to be a painless meeting, and it will lead him to a path to follow a painful calling. He will be born to unmarried parents, miles from home, in a barn, with no health care provider. Soon thereafter, with his parents, he will be a refugee, making a dangerous trek across treacherous terrain to seek asylum in a foreign land as escape from the rampages of a hell-bent regional despot. Returning later to his hometown, his family and all families there would chafe under the oppressive reign of a lurking and expansionist foreign empire. For the last 3 years of his life, he would be homeless. He would teach and preach and start a movement which reached both to those who hoped and those who feared. The movement would be noticed by both church and state, who in a tag team effort would spike him to a cross and seal him in a tomb from which on the third day he would rise again, rise from the dead, rise to ascend to the throne of the King of Kings and Caesars and presidents and regional despots forever and ever. And his disciples, his church, would teach and preach, and together they would worship him, knowing because of him, knowing in him that light is greater than dark, life is greater than death, mercy is greater than sin, love is greater than hate, and fear is greater than nothing. Which takes us to today, where we together, not united by our one and the sameness, but by our one and the same Lord. We together as the church are here to worship the one who is the church's one foundation. And it's Stewardship Sunday, which means we're going to talk about money. Because all the church ever does is talk about money, right? Instead of talking about spiritual things, like we should, right? No. We talk about money, not anywhere near all the time. If you think we talk about money all the time, you need to come more often. But we talk about money unapologetically sometimes, because number one, the one who we do call Lord actually talked about money a lot. I mean, read the book. He talked about money a lot, and he said, this isn't me, this is him, so deal with Jesus. He said that talking about money was precisely a spiritual conversation. Or do you think that part about your treasure and your heart was just an allegory? Number two, we talk about money, not anywhere near all the time, but unapologetically sometimes, because we believe that in this church, this building, which itself costs money to build and which we are in the midst of discovering also costs money to maintain, faithfully being the church in this building, being the church which is not a building, but a movement of love that is greater than hate, a movement of light that shines in the dark, a movement of the hungry being fed with real food, whether it is real bread for the really hungry bellies they have, or real life for the hungry souls that they have. We believe that being the church, which is not just a building but a people gathered precisely not by fear but by grace to this building, a people sent not with judgments but with servant hearts from this building. We believe, indeed we know, that faithfully being the church we are called by Christ to be, not in every way, but in more than a few ways, costs money. And we have, as the church, exactly one source of that money, and that is the financial commitment of our members and friends to the ways in which Jesus Christ is worshiped and known and served through the mission and ministries of this congregation and of the ELCA. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to ask, as Pam mentioned, by next Sunday, if possible, all of our members, if you're not a member, this doesn't apply, but we're going to ask our members to fill out an estimate of giving pledge card, either a hard copy that you got in the mail, or if you are one of these people. I mean, I know friends in the United States Postal Service. I don't know what they do with stewardship pledge cards. Because seriously, it's like 12% of them actually get to people's homes. I don't know where these things go, but people will say, I didn't get it. So we have these stewardship pledge cards available in the office, if in case the U.S. Postal Service just flagrantly disregarded how important that was. Or if you're on our email list, you will get an email, and you'll actually be able, for the first time this year, to complete this digitally, or even to go online. Doug, good job. You can just go send, and it automatically is in. We're going to ask you to do that, to tell us how much of the money we believe we need to be the church that we believe we're called to be is going to come because one of the members of this congregation is you. Okay? That's what we do. So today we're going to talk about that. I want to be clear about something. Those cards are estimates of giving. All right? And nobody knows what next year is going to bring. You don't know. When you fill out a card like that, you say, if God blesses me next year the way God has blessed me this year, this is what I intend to do. You may have a downturn next year that you don't know about, in which case, of course, you would give less. And we absolutely understand that. We will not send our goons out to collect your pledge or harass you with phone calls. Or, of course, you may have an economic upturn, in which, of course, I know that you would gratefully want to do more than you put on your pledge card, correct? And so you're just saying, if next year is the same as this year, this is what I would gratefully do. What I want to do today to begin thinking about that is kind of a Bible Stewardship 101 kind of thing, just to say a few things that are true about this stewardship topic. If you think about it the way the Bible thinks about it, you may discover that you don't think about it the way the Bible thinks about it, okay? You can work that out however you want to. But if you think about this stewardship thing the way the Bible thinks about it, well, here are some things. Let's start with that word stewardship. In Bible times, stewards were people who were entrusted to run a business or a farm, and this business or farm wasn't owned by them. The owner entrusted it to them to manage according to the owner's interests and desires. When the Bible uses the word stewardship, one thing it is saying is that whether we're talking about money or time or talents or businesses or farms or families or faith or friends or even life itself, nothing is ultimately yours. Everything, every good thing for absolute sure, was given to us by the Creator and owner of everything, including us. A cranky farmer got kind of crankier when his pastor sat at his kitchen table drinking his coffee and told him that in the Bible's way of thinking, his farm didn't ultimately belong to him but to God. What do you mean, he said? I can show you the legal deeds to prove this land is mine. The pastor said, that's okay. I don't need to see the paperwork. Let's just plan on you and me getting together, talk about this again in, I don't know, should we say 100 years? I won't be here in 100 years, said the man. Exactly, said his pastor. In the Bible's way of thinking, nothing is ultimately mine. Everything's a gift from God, who calls me to use what I've been entrusted with to looking out not only for my interests and desires, but for the interests and desires of God, the owner of everything. Which is why when it comes to giving things to things that we understand to be the purposes of God for us or the purposes of God via us, the Bible's primary thought process is never how much of what is mine am I going to part with? But rather, how much of everything that God has given to me am I going to give back? Among other things, to say thank you. In that first reading we heard today, King David was trying to raise some money for a building program at his church. Who knew they had capital appeals in the Old Testament? But he's trying to raise money so that his son Solomon, when he became king, could build a church, a temple for God in Jerusalem. The first thing David did in his capital appeal was to give what he could for the project. This is always a good place to start when you talk about money at church. Each of us asking ourselves, am I doing what I can? This is me stepping back for a moment while each of you asks the question, am I doing what I can? First thing David did in his capital appeal was to do what he could. After which, he said, he asked the people to do what they could, to which they responded. Did you hear this? They said, how come the church just does nothing but talk about money? That's not what they said. You know what they did? It says they responded. Who knew this is possible? It says they responded generously, joyfully. And so David prayed a prayer of thanks, and in that prayer you can hear that he understood this big picture, Bible's way of thinking, stewardship point that I'm talking about. For in this prayer he says, all things come from you, O Lord, and from your own we give to you. You hear that? David completely understood the Bible when it talks about our offerings and our money, what it says absolutely, and that is that none of us can give anything to God, that in fact God hasn't given us first. Which is why David didn't respond to the generosity of the people by thanking them. He was king. You could run programs like that. But he also was a man of God. He responded to the generosity of the people by leading them in a prayer of thanks to God for giving them something that they could be generous with. So, given what you have to be generous with, how generous should you be? I mean, it's going to come down to crunch time here pretty soon. Now, for the Bible's way of thinking about that, at least a glimpse into it, I want to look at that, just a portion of that second reading. By the way, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, I mean, it could be a 5-week sermon series on stewardship, but you don't want one of those right now. Paul is writing 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, his own kind of stewardship sermon, for he is writing to the church in Corinth to collect an offering for the church in Jerusalem, which is going through some hard times. And in doing so, he doesn't tell them how much to give. Rather, he tells them to give in the same way the Macedonians had already given when he says they voluntarily gave according to their means. Here is a basic principle of Bible Stewardship 101. You don't give according to what you don't have. You give according to what you do have, which is why you will never hear me say that here's how we will address stewardship here at Gloria Dei. If every single person here gives X amount of dollars, then we're all doing our share. That is not true. I'll never say that because biblically, generosity isn't measured by a specific amount that you give. It's measured by how the amount that you give compares to the amount you have. I happen to know that some of the most generous givers in this church give $10 or $20 a week, which is a lot less than my wife and I give, except it's not. It's more than my wife and I give, because some of those folks who give $10 or $20 a week make sacrifices in order to do that. Generosity biblically is not measured by the dollar amount you give. It's measured by the amount how that you give compares to what you have, which is why Jesus in our gospel text today did not lift up as an example of generosity the rich people who pridefully, noisily made their big offerings and loud donations. He lifted up as an example that poor widow who quietly, humbly, she's actually almost embarrassed as she slips up and drops a penny in the plate. But it's everything that she has. The Christians in Macedonia, Paul says, voluntarily gave according to their means. Actually, he says they even gave beyond their means. Beyond their means. Now, this humbles all of us, and that is not what you are necessarily called to do, to give beyond your means. But those who do, and I know some of them, they remind me of something Mother Teresa once said: if you give only what you do not need, it is not giving. That's Mother Teresa, of course. That's a rock star of the faith. The more realistic challenge for most of us who are not rock stars, I suspect, isn't to give even though it takes away from the things we need. I think the challenge for most of us not rock stars is to give after doing some serious soul searching about what truly are our needs, as opposed to just being our wants that we are convinced we need. So, wrapping up and cutting to the chase, you're home this week and you know what you have and what you make, and you do believe that in the Lord that this church worships, and you do believe in this mission and ministry we're trying to have of getting as much Jesus and His grace and love into the world as possible. And now you have that pledge card in your hands because even though the Postal Service lost it, you picked up another one, or because you got online and downloaded it digitally. And how much of what God has given you are you going to give back? Dollar amount. I'm not going to tell you. I don't know your circumstances. The Bible does, with a smile on its face, lift up the practice of tithing, which is the practice of giving 10% of your income, not necessarily all to church, but in some way or other to the purposes of God in the world and to the needs of your neighbors in the world. Some of you do that. Some of you do more than that. Some of you would like to do that, but you just can't right now, and that is absolutely understandable, absolutely fine. Remember, the Bible never asks anyone to do what they can't and to give from what they don't have. Sometimes what you do have are mouths to feed and clothes to buy and fixed expenses that you can't change. And so you can't maybe give financially what you wish you could right now. It is fine. You have other ways you can be generous. Everybody has other ways, too, that they can be generous. The Bible doesn't ask you to be generous with what you don't have. So I'm not here to pressure you today. I'm here to challenge you, and in challenging you, I'm challenging me too. Let's all be honest about what we do have. Let's not get sucked into our culture's definition of things that you think you have to have. And Thanksgiving being right around the corner, let's count our blessings. And then, not as we're not able, but as we're able, let's be generous with our time, with our talents, with our treasures. And if you are a Gloria Dei member, with some of those treasures, some of your money, not all of it, but some of it, be generous for the work of God we do seek faithfully to do, gathered by grace here, and going out into the world with grace from here. Because why? Because darn it has been quite a week in Lake Wobegon, and Iowa City, and Washington, D.C. It's been such a week, such a year, such a world we've become, that I'm not sure there's ever been a time more important for the church that calls Jesus Lord to remind the world he came to save that light is greater than dark, life is greater than death, mercy is greater than sin, love is greater than hate, and fear is greater than nothing. To God be the glory and the gratitude forever and ever. Amen.